Today's episode is brought to you by the Campaign for Black Male Achievement. Now listen, the current political and social climate, combined with the urgent challenges that our Black men and boys are facing, demand that we act boldly right now. 25% of Black children don't graduate high school on time. Compare that to the national average of 17%. Now, if we compound the issue even further, Black male graduation rate sits at 59%. Compare that to 65% for Latino males and 80% for white males, and you realize why CBMA is a beacon of hope. They're the only organization right now making themselves available to those leaders and organizations that are on the ground, working to advance the cause and reverse this narrative for Black men and boys. If you've not yet done so, I urge you today to visit tbpod.com/partners. Learn more about the Campaign for Black Male Achievement. Consider joining their membership and investing in the future of our Black men and boys.
You're listening to the Trailblazers.fm podcast, where we'll explore the stories of today's successful Black professionals, entrepreneurs, and leaders. Join us to access the knowledge, resources, and tools of these accomplished professionals and come away with the know-how, confidence, and motivation you'll need to blaze your trail. And now, here's your host, Stephen A. Hart.
Hello and welcome to the 190th episode of the Trailblazers.fm podcast. Wow, I'm still in awe of that number and the realization that we're just 10 episodes away from our 200th episode. Such a milestone that's been, a long time coming, right? We've been almost 4 years into this. And I'm so excited. For the entire month of September, we have been celebrating Black Male Achievement in partnership with our sponsor, the Campaign for Black Male Achievement. And all month long, we are featuring 5 amazing trailblazers who are doing phenomenal work in this space. And the series has been informative in so many ways. Don't know about you guys, but I'm loving all the gems that I'm taking in, right? And our guest for today is going to continue along that, blazing that trail, right? Mr. Anthony Smith of Cities United had a chat with me, and better than me introducing you to Anthony, I thought we'd have, like we did last week, I thought we'd have the CEO of CBMA, Mr. Sean Dove, to introduce you to Anthony. Sean, I'd love you to tell me a little bit more about Mr. Anthony Smith.
Anthony Smith, my brother from another mother from Louisville, Kentucky. Anthony Smith is the executive director of Cities United, which is a consortium of mayors working around the country to eliminate violent deaths. And one of the most empathetic, compassionate brothers that I know. Anthony and I have known each other since about 2010. And every time I am in Louisville, try to connect with him. And he is, I would say, Stephen, when we look at the issue and the problem that he is trying to solve in this nation and build and safe, healthy, and hopeful communities and reducing gun violence, particularly by Black men and against Black men, has one of the hardest jobs in America. And I think that Anthony, if I was to describe him, he is a brother that is humble as a lamb, yet bold as a lion. And I am glad he's on this show because I have been pushing him to be more in the forefront and to tell his story and voice the work that he's doing. So we're going to put Anthony on blast with Trailblazers Nation today.
Thank you so much, Sean. Wanted to give our big ups before we dived into my conversation with Anthony. Give our big ups to a couple of our listeners. Kelly R. Little and Bennett Pods over on Apple Podcast left us 5-star ratings and reviews. Whether this is your first time listening or your 190th time listening, if you listen on Apple Podcasts in the app and you've not yet left us a review, do us a solid like Kelly and Bennett did. Hop into your Apple Podcasts app on your iPhone, search Trailblazers.fm, click on that write a review link and leave your honest thoughts and what you've learned by way of listening to the show. Really goes a long way to help us rise in that Apple database when you do so and help us out. So enough respect, appreciate that. That said, let's go ahead and grab a pad and pen. Or if you feel more comfortable, open your favorite note-taking app. Let's get set to receive today's mission fuel from our featured trailblazer for today, Mr. Anthony Smith. Anthony, thank you so much, my brother. Appreciate you.
Thank you, man. It's great to be on.
So much happening in our world today, right? And despite all the challenges, some of which we'll get into in a minute here, I love to start all our conversations off from a place of gratitude.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I was wondering if I could have you kind of kick things off and share an unexpected blessing that you're most grateful for in your life right now.
Oh, man. I'm assuming for me, I mean, there's so many to think through and talk through, right? But I think we just came out of our 6th annual convening. We hosted it in Hampton, Virginia, and we hosted it during the time when folks were acknowledging and remembering the 400th year of when the first enslaved African came to the shores of America. Mm-hmm. And just to be there during that time and to reconnect with our ancestors and really have some time and space to think through that. I didn't know what we were into and what we were going to do, but that whole week ended up being way more impactful than I thought it was and blessed me in ways that I didn't think I could be. And then just some of the conversations that happened at the convening really, really grounded that. So, and made the connections, what we do and how we do it as a team and as an organization just showed up in ways that we didn't think it was going to. And it impacts people in ways we don't think it's going to, right? So that alone I knew it was going to be good and dope, but I just didn't know how much. So those unexpected times and words and response that we've gotten since we've been back have really, really been a blessing in a way to keep going. So, yeah.
I feel like Pamela Jolly was telling me a little bit about that.
Yeah, she was there. So she did the opening, right? So, and to be able to be in space with a bunch of good people like Sean Dove, Pamela Jolly. I mean, there were just so many. I could go Ron Walker, just a list of folks who all came out to support this, from Dr. Bell, who's on our board, Mayor Nutter, just all of these people in the space. And the young people who were just there who took over. So, I mean, I could go through a whole list of day by day of how many things surprised me and blessed me. And that I'm grateful for that, it could be the whole show.
That's it. That's it. Mr. Louisville, Kentucky.
That's the hometown of the greatest Muhammad Ali.
Are you from Louisville?
Born and raised, man.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Sure, the landscape has probably changed a bunch.
Just a little bit since 1969, yeah. So
Bring me back 25, 30 years ago. Tell me about something positive about Louisville back when.
Man, so I grew up in the west end of Louisville in the Shawnee neighborhood. And for me, I still consider that home, right? So if you think about, for me, the positive of that, right? And the ideal that you get to be a part of a community that produces Ali, that produces other great scholars and leaders, just shows you what we can do and what we can be, right? So I think that for me is always why I stay in Louisville and why I won't live Louisville and why a lot of the work I do are in neighborhoods like the one that I grew up in, right? So for me, that's always the grounding at home. And I just think, we actually just celebrated the 50th anniversary of this outdoor basketball tournament we call it, called Dirt Bowl. So it's been this 50-year journey in the park in Shawnee that young people started. So, I mean, just all of those things like that. So I can see a lot of positive in Louisville, even with the challenging times.
You used to hoop?
No, man, I'm not a hoop. I used to play football. I thought I was going to be the next Earl Campbell. No basketball. And I remember soccer, and it all went away. So, yeah.
So today, right, you're a CEO of Cities United, which is an organization I think has been around for 8 or 9 years?
Yeah, it was founded in 2011. So we've been around since 2011. So make it 8 years.
You're doing really important work, very difficult work in many ways to help eliminate violent deaths of Black men and boys, particularly via handguns. I'd love to have you expand on that for a minute, maybe explain a little bit about Cities United more than I have and the work that you're being driven to carry out in this season right now.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So, like I said, Cities United was founded in 2011. Mayor Nutter and Dr. William Bell, Mayor Nutter was the former mayor of Philadelphia, and Dr. Bell, who's the president and CEO of the Casey Family Programs, were having this conversation around the homicides and the high number of homicides that were happening in Philadelphia, but not just in Philadelphia, but across the country. So they partnered with Mayor Landrieu from New Orleans, Sean Dove from the Campaign for Black Male Achievement, and our friends in the National League of Cities, and really came together to say, what can we do to support a group of mayors or a network of mayors who are really concerned or who really wanting to focus in on the issue. And we really talk about how do we keep young Black men and boys and their families safe, healthy, and hopeful. Our ultimate goal is to reduce the homicide rate of young Black men and boys by 50% by the year 2025. But really, we want to make sure that not only we keep you alive, but how do we make sure that you're in a space where you can thrive?
right? How do we make sure you have better educational outcomes, better employment outcomes, better housing options, and all of those things that make people feel safe, healthy, and hopeful, right? So it's one thing to stay alive. It's another thing to still be able to feel like you can live out your dreams and you can do that in a safe, healthy place, right? So we spend a lot of time with mayors, community members, especially young people who are most impacted by violence, helping them think long-term strategies, right? So Cities United work with cities and really help them develop what we call a two-pronged approach to violence prevention, right? How do you keep young people alive today, those who are in harm's way, but also start thinking about upstream? How do you break that cycle, right? How do you create agendas and policies that break the cycle so that we don't have young men and women and young girls in harm's way, right? So we work that way, really helping them design what we call a comprehensive public safety plan, asking them to reimagine what public safety is and how they define it and how they fund it. Because right now, when people think about public safety, they're thinking about police, detention centers, and jails. And we're saying public safety, again, is access to quality education, access to great housing, access to jobs. And then we're also saying that if young people are in harm's way or if young people are in trouble, that means their parents are most likely in trouble. So how do we help you think about a two-generational approach, not just the kid in front of you, but also thinking about who they go home to and who supports them along the way? So, we started with 2 mayors in 2011. We're now at about 130 cities around the country. The board and the folks who helped put Cities United together challenged us to work with 500 mayors over the life course of the 2025. So we're constantly adding mayors and constantly bringing mayors in and helping them design those strategies because, homicides, even though it's a national emergency or a national epidemic, it happens in cities. And if we can help those in cities really put together good strategies, we think we can really reduce that number.
Anthony, could you maybe share, is there any data or any case study where you can show where that's actually had positive impact?
Yeah, so when we started Cities United, we were losing 14 young men between the ages of 14 and 24 every 24 hours, right? So when Cities United started, that was the call, right? The call was we lose 14 young men every day we go to sleep and every day we wake up. Those 14 young men don't get to wake up. So we looked at data last year at the convening and we've seen progress. We are now seeing losing, instead of 14, there's 12, which still is way too many. But there's progress being made and there's lives been saved. So if you think about cities that have really focused in, when Mayor Nutter and Mayor Landrieu, both of them were in office, they really created their strategies, their comprehensive public safety plans. And both of them saw reductions in the target population and the work that they were doing, right? So when you look at their numbers, they consistently saw the numbers going down and was working towards that. Now, part of our struggle and part of the work we're working on now is when mayors transition, how do we get the new mayor and their team to stay the course, right? So when we're asking them to develop plans, we're saying to them, do your work in a way where it can be owned by community. And no matter who's in office, the community is going to demand that this work continues. Another great example that you can look at would be in Oakland. There's a couple of reports out in Oakland that shows they're consistent over the last 10 years reduction because they are focused in, they're using the strategies that we talk about and the work that we talk about. And then I would also say that if you think about Richmond, California as well, that's had significant reductions based on some of the strategies.
I appreciate you sharing that, man. Bring me back here because we're in a series, right, that Sean and I talked about at the beginning of this year and was celebrating Black male achievement. I've learned so much about Black male achievement over this time that I've kind of been learning under Sean's wing, right? But for those that are listening that are maybe not in this space, right? Talk to us about what your take is on what Black male achievement is and what it's about.
I think it's just that, right? It's one, celebrating that we've always achieved, right? Black men and boys and Black folks have always been able to achieve, even in with the regulations and policies and laws and just racism, period. Black men and Black women have always been able to achieve. I think for so long, we spent too much time talking on not achievement, right? And things that we go through that when you start thinking about it, one, how do you celebrate those who are achieving? But then how do you create space for those who are struggling and making sure that this is not just a sum of us, but it's all of us? So I think Black male achievement does both. It celebrates those who are on making strides and achieving, but also say we got to do more and we got to hold people accountable to make sure that all of our young Black men and boys can achieve so that they can all live out their dreams, right? So when you talk about it, for me, it really is creating a space where we get to try things, we get to fail, we get to succeed, but it's never at a place where, if I fail, that I don't get to try again. And I think for far too long, we have not created a space for a lot of our young Black men and boys to have all the opportunities to succeed as most of us did. You know, it took us a while to get to where we are, right?
Yeah.
When you think about how I got to be the ED of Cities United, it's not a story that most people would want to hear, right? I'm a high school dropout. It took me 7 years to get my BA, but it was because I had people always supporting me and saying, you can do it. And then I just got in the right places at the right time, right? Because at the end of the day, most people don't think you're supposed to run a national organization unless you have a master's or doctor behind your name or a law degree, right? But because of the support I had and opportunities I had, create that space for all of our young people, right? And it was been real clear that once you find your purpose, you can really move on things. So what we're trying to do with Black Male Achievement is help young people find their purpose and then live in that purpose and create space for them to do that.
I think that's so powerful what you just said, man. And I think there's no accident, right? Like God had intentions for you in your specific story that you just touched on, you know, to have that impact. How do you look at Cities United, right? And how do you look at its unique role in this movement of Black male achievement?
So, you know, Cities United, we get to be real focused, right? Our job is to create space for young Black men and boys and their families to be safe, healthy, and hopeful, right? So our conversation is strictly that. We know at the end of the day, we're trying to reduce homicide rates, but we know that to do that, we've got to be supported and partnered with a lot of other folks that are helping young Black men and boys achieve, right? Because we believe that if young Black men and boys are growing up in communities where they see themselves, where they know they can connect and thrive, we won't have as many homicides. We won't have as many shootings, right? Because they see other options. They see other ways out, and they don't get into the things that will lead them into harm's way. So for us, we know the Campaign for Black Male Achievement, Be Me, COSBOT, all of those folks who are helping us change the narrative, all those folks who are helping us think about educational outcomes need to be a part of that conversation for us, because for far too long, we've allowed a lot of our young Black men and boys just to be pushed to the wayside. So for us, Cities United helps have that conversation and help it stay focused on who we're talking about, right? So we are a part of the Boys and Men of Color space, and we know we're a part of the Boys and Men of Color space, but we're specifically working for Black men and boys and families, right? So I think that for us, help us be unique in a way that we get to be real clear about what our outcomes are and who they're for.
I love the focus. You know, you guys have this central focus in your strategy on mayors, but I can't help but think like the present administration probably is not healthy, right? To like the situation right now, right? And this current uptick in violence. Do you see that as kind of fuel for the current uptick in violence in some of these cities? Or is there other things that you're seeing that kind of is combating kind of what you're trying to fight against?
Yeah, so I think the current environment is creating some of the violence, right? But it's not really having an impact on the day-to-day violence that we think about and talk about, right? For us, it still is, and that could be part of, but it still is like the remnants of all of the bad policies, from redlining to urban renewal to all of the things that have kept our communities cut out of the opportunities as the thing that we're dealing with today, right? So if you think about whether it's Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, our neighborhoods have been dealing with this issue for a long time.
So it don't matter who in the federal space, yeah.
So therefore, it's been, for some reason, it doesn't feel like it matters who's in office, because nobody is really paying specific attention to the root causes of why we're dealing with this, right? So we try for so long, and we still try for so long, to treat this issue with law enforcement and not with the public health approach that we need to, right? So everybody wants to be tough on crime, but nobody wants to think about how crime is produced, right? So again, we can have this conversation with mayors because they're real close to it, and they can start making changes locally, but we still got to make sure we're working on the state level and the federal level, because we need those resources to trickle down to then support the work, right? So for us, we're constantly trying to think about policies and other things, and there's been movement and there's always some movement. But when you think about the day-to-day grind of the young people we're talking about, federal policy, federal elected folks most likely don't impact their lives in that way.
You touch on this, and you talked about it a second ago, but I'm still trying to unpack, because your focus is on mayors and you explained the history of that, but why are mayors still central to the strategy for creating, in the words of Brother Dove, creating the change you're seeking to see?
So for us, so mayors, if you think about a mayor and you think about a city and how it operates, right? In most cities, mayors serve as the CEO, mayors serve as the leader, mayors help set the vision for the city. So for us, if we can get mayors to understand that they need to create a special vision for young Black men and boys and their families around this issue. And when they do, that means they got to think about their policies. And when they think about their policies, that includes their budget, right? So they have control over what is the vision for the city and how do they make everybody feel inclusive of that. And they also have convening power. So when they want to have a conversation about an issue, people come to the table, right? So they can bring people to the table. They can help, craft a message around this. They can help advocate for resources for this. They can say to their local businesses and local philanthropy, we need your help solving this, right? So mayors play a unique role. Some cities as mayors, city managers, some cities as mayors, county managers, and city managers, but mayors in most cities play a unique role in how that city moves while it's their term. So if we can get them to vision what it looks like to have safe, healthy, and hopeful communities for young Black men and boys and all their kids, but being specific around this issue, we think we could get a whole lot more work done, right? So if you have a collective of mayors, and again, that's local, but if you have a collective of mayors in the state, then they can advocate a state policy together. And then if you have a whole national organization of mayors, you can then take them to DC and say, these are the things we need to better run our cities.
Yeah.
Right. So mayors have that unique position where they vision, where they convene, and where they influence policies and budgets that really help us move our work.
Love that, man. You bringing me educating the Jamaican brother, man. I appreciate that. You touched on the housing component earlier, right? And I'd love to talk about that for a second. You're also leading a massive economic mobility effort in Louisville, right? Called Russell Place of Promise.
Yep.
Putting Black people at the center of home ownership and property acquisitions. Talk to me, Anthony, about how Black home ownership is helping with some of the gentrification happening in cities across the country.
Yeah, so I think that's part of the reason why gentrification happens so quickly is because most of those neighborhoods ownership is so low. Right. So folks can come in and buy properties, and most of those neighborhoods have been so disinvested in. There's a bunch of vacant and abandoned properties just waiting for somebody to come and buy. So when you think about Russell, a place of promise, we were real clear that we saw transformation beginning to happen in this neighborhood. It's a historically Black neighborhood. Black folks have been living there for over 150 plus years. It was considered Harlem of the South. Walnut Street, which runs through the neighborhood, which is now Ali Street, was once like the mecca for Black families and business owners. It went away with urban renewal and redlining. So when you think about what this place was, it's always been a place of promise for Black folks, right? Historic Central High School was there where most of the young people who have graduated from there, you got all of these stellar people. It was one of the two schools where Black folks could go to school for the long time in Louisville. So it's been producing excellence for the last 150 years. It's still that way. It's predominantly an African-American school with a magnets around law and medical, right? Wow. So these young folks come from all over the city to be here because they want to be at a Black school, getting Black history. I had the first library that actually let Black folks check out books in the country, right? So, I mean, it has a rich history. Yeah. And what we were afraid of there's a choice neighborhood going on. So they tore down the housing project and created a mixed income house in there. It's right next to downtown. So you see bike lanes coming, a whole lot of stuff's happening. But then there's a whole lot of development happening in and around it. So what we wanted to do in partnership with Keenan Charitable Trust and Dorian Burton over there was really try to get ahead of that, right? So how do you get ahead of what you see is coming? And then how do you create opportunities for the families who have lived there, who want to come back and live there, and really focus in on Black wealth building and Black wealth generation, right? So we're saying to families, let's think about how we buy homes and property in this neighborhood and what does that look like? So working with banks and working with housing partners to say, what could we structure so that the Black families who have been here, who have always held it down here, can take advantage of that? But it's not just home ownership. We're also thinking about business development. There's a number of families who have owned businesses in the neighborhood for a long time who might still be leasing, right? So we're saying, how do we help them own their property? Right. And then how do you create a succession plan for them so it doesn't go away? And then how do you develop all of the abandoned buildings? So there's a big 200,000 square foot building that we're looking at and said, how do we renovate that building? And what's happening there, where to be a mixed use building, but across the street from there, our friends at the Urban League are looking at this 24 acre lot and saying, how do we turn that into a sports and learning complex? They're raising 38 million, I think is the number. They've already raised 17 million. And they want to build this indoor-outdoor track that would be owned by a Black organization that will allow us to compete nationally, because or regionally at least, where you can bring in track and field events, you can do concerts there. So, I mean, it's just a whole lot of cool stuff that's happening. But at the end of the day, for us, it's always about who owns what. So at the end of the day, we want as much as possible to be Black owned, Black ownership. And we're also in an opportunity zone. So it's one of the tracks to set aside for opportunity zone, where folks can put their money into this for tax shelter, where folks can put money in, invest in the underserved neighborhood. And then if that money sits for 10 years, they can make a profit or they don't have to pay taxes on it. So there's ways for rich folks to come in and invest. And we're actually being real clear with that. We don't want everybody to invest, right? We only want certain people who want to invest alongside with community members, right? So if you come in and invest, we're asking you to have your investment, but then part of that investment that you're making, you own some and community owns some. But how can we do that? Right? Because at the end of the day, we want as much of this to be community owned and community led, right? So this project that we're building here will inform how we do work across the country.
Right.
So what we learn here around economic development, housing development, all of that, then will influence Cities United work in the 130 cities. It might not be full blown, but it will impact us around how you use economic development to reduce homicides and reduce shootings in communities.
Yeah. Appreciate that, man. As we look ahead and you're planning and you're working through your vision, what do you see Cities United being in another 5 or 10?
So it's funny that you asked, right? So we are this week right now in a strategic planning process, right?
That's the time of the year, man. I was doing that today as well.
And we're thinking about what does it look like and how do we get there, right? So again, we've got this big goal, right, to reduce the homicide rate of young Black men and boys in half by 2025, 14 to 24 and half by 2025. So that's our main focus, right? How do we get there? And how do we help cities and organizations and young people really create those strategies, right? So for us, the next 5 years is really about reaching that goal. So for Cities United, though, we've got to build out the capacity so we have the right resources, the right people, the right strategies to really build that out and get there. So a lot of that looks like, how do we train up more young people, right? We have a fellowship where we take 15 young people a year between the ages of 18 and 24, take them through a 9-month fellowship, where we're really trying to prepare the next generation of folks who are going to do this work, right? Giving them the tools they need, the resources they need, the connections they need, and asking them and saying to them, we need you to be prepared and ready, not just to lead your seat today, but also lead at a bigger seat when the time comes. Well, let's get you ready for that, right? So for us, we're about really coaching and developing the current generation of folks working, but also making sure we create space for others. So for us, we want to have about 500 mayors working with us. We want to be in 500 cities across the country. We want to make sure that we are really pushing this narrative around why it matters that we make sure that young Black men and boys have better outcomes, right? Because I think that's part of this country's problem. A lot of people don't believe we should. Right. And we're trying to say we should. And how do we do that? Even for those who don't believe, right? So Cities United vision really is over the next 5 years, reach that goal, to hit that target, and then decide what we're going to be and how we're going to move post that, which we'll start thinking about it way before then. But 5 years from now, we want to be successful in the goal that we set out in the mission that we have.
We'll get there, man. Most definitely. Before I ask you, so time to start wrapping up our conversation, but wanted to get some insight into some of the books that you're reading, maybe help arm and prepare us as we're looking to lead, right? Any books that come to mind that, you think we should maybe consider adding to the reading list?
Man, so that's, so the problem is I buy too many books that I can't read.
Yeah.
So
that's why I listen to audiobooks, Anthony.
I don't even do that, right? I can give you some podcasts that I think you should listen to. I've got a list of books and I can't tell you which ones because it's just, I have not been able to dive into like I want to. But most of my reading right now usually are articles, and I find stuff that I can read through quickly. But yeah, so man, I just think, there's so much out there that people should be getting their hands on and going through and reading. I think the last thing I read all the way through was Monique. Her book was called Push Out, and it was around young Black girls.
I haven't gotten into that one yet.
Yeah, so that was it. And then I think, so yeah, man, it's hard. You take more time, so I can't even give you. I'm not even gonna try to make.
No worries. So before I ask you the last question, I want you to tell our community how we can stay connected to you.
Oh, yeah. Please follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Cities United. You can go to our website, citiesunited.org. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram as at ANTS012369. Again, that's at ANTS01639 on both Twitter and Instagram. And that's where you can find us at and find our work. If you really want to know about our work, go check out our resources on our website. We've got a lot of resources for mayors and city folks to use.
Love it. Last question for you, Anthony. What's one action those listening to this episode should take this week that's going to help them to blaze their trail?
One action that folks should take this week that's going to help them blaze their trail. Identify what your purpose is, right? Find out what you're here to do. Stay true to that. So if you don't know, find it. If you do know, make sure that's all you're working on, because that's what you're here to do. And we don't need you to do anything else but that.
That's right. That's right. My brother, Anthony Smith, God bless you, my brother. Thank you so very much, man.
Appreciate it.
After the part 2 of this and continue talking. I learned quite a bit listening to you tonight.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you. Enjoy your time, man. Be safe.
I'm Steve Nehart, and you've been listening to the Trailblazers.fm podcast. If you're not yet doing so, consider following Trailblazers.fm on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and feel free to connect with me over on LinkedIn. Whenever you're posting stories or social media posts about Trailblazers.fm, be sure to use the hashtag TBPod and hashtag Mission Fuel. We'll be able to see you, and I'll be able to show some love. And in case you're not aware, our show notes for all our episodes can be found on our website over at tbpod.com. Now, if today was your first time listening, I just want to say big ups and enough respect for checking us out. You've made this Jamaican guy really happy that you're here with us today. And I'd love your help with keeping this Black excellence flowing each and every week. So if you haven't yet subscribed, hop on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Search Trailblazers.fm and subscribe, rate, and review us there. Be sure to browse through some of our past episodes. There are more than 150 published episodes now, and a little something is out there for everyone to help keep the knowledge flowing. We grow when you, as part of our Blazer Nation community, shares and invites your friends and family to listen to an episode you think might impact them most. We believe that someone listening to these inspiring stories are going to be moved to make significant changes that have generational impact for many others, both now and well into the future. Don't miss next week's episode. New episodes are released each and every Monday morning at 5 a.m. Eastern. Blaze the Nation, go out today and find a way to rise above, go way beyond, and keep blazing your trail.